Yo, yo, it's time to discover the flow. Shout out to the bros, you know. I like to welcome everybody to discover the flow. No matter how you discover the show or discover the bros, now you about to see how far we can go, because it's time for discover the flow. Yeah, cowabunga do, you know live is how we come to you. Turn the levels up when you hear the boys coming through. The pod squad giving you just what you need, hitting you with a new special guest every week. Don't you dare hit skip, man, it's Tristan and Kip. DTF pod about to take you on a trip. Mega Ran bring the heat, yeah. But be clear, I wasn't even supposed to be here. Welcome to Discover the Flow. No matter how you discovered the show or discovered the bros, now you about to see how far we can go, because it's time for Discover the Flow. Let's start the show.
How has your weekend been so far?
Pretty good. Getting some sleep and had some nice weather. I'm down here in Kentucky, just west of Lexington, so it's been nice and mild. So enjoying that. How about you all?
Like I said, a little chilly. We ended up somehow staying out until 3 a.m. last night. We were like, we're too old for that. We can't getting way too old for that shit.
You're all located where again? I'm sorry.
Just outside Chicago.
Chicago. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, town called Naperville.
Okay.
So, for the benefit of our audience, Justin, why don't you tell everybody who you are and why we took interest in you?
Okay. I am the nephew of Jim Varney. My mother was one of his 3 older sisters. About 12 years ago, I released a book about his life, a biography called The Importance of Being Ernest, The Life of Actor Jim Varney. Stuff that Vern doesn't even know. It took me almost 6 years to write and research, and then about a month ago now, I released an audiobook version that I narrated myself. It took me almost about 3 years to put together. That was quite an undertaking of its own. So, yeah.
So, I mean, other than the obvious of holy crap, my uncle's Ernest, like what made you want to do the undertaking of writing the biography?
Well, it he died in 2000. It was around 2008, and of course I'm on the internet, on YouTube, certain sites like that, seeing a lot of stuff that people post about him. A lot of people posting commercials, and then I'm reading the comments. And, so many of them are just so glowing, talking about how he was such a big part of their childhood, and like how he was their hero and so forth. And then other parts of the internet, I'd see like certain facts, quote, like facts about him that weren't really correct. And that not that somebody's trying to put anything out there that was on purpose that was bad, but they didn't have all the facts. And I thought, well, I have a lot of the facts, and a lot of the facts I don't have, I know I could go find them, right? And so I decided, I was thinking, it's been 8 years and nobody's written a book about Jim, and maybe I'm the person that can do it. I didn't know of a lot of people that actually could. That maybe I was just one of the few that could really take that on, that had kind of that insider knowledge about him, and that and the access to certain people, and then just the ability to do all the research and all that. So I started to take that on right there in like March of 2008. And of course, like the comments, people talking about him as their hero, that really struck me too, because I didn't really look at Ernest like a hero type of person, really. I grew up like around Superman and like Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that really connected me, thinking about how much I love Christopher Reeve, and thinking about how these people a lot of them saw Ernest the same way I saw like Superman, right? That, he didn't have the classics like superhero type of, abilities and so forth, maybe, but I could see the way he connected to kids, and that he did have a lot of that same, the same qualities though, that I hadn't really realized. Not all like heroes wear capes, right? So that really helped to inspire me along the way. connecting with the fans like that with my own heroes growing up. So.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it where people would look at him that way, especially after the movies and stuff like that, because Ernest was always, for lack of a better term, always saving something.
Right. True. Exactly. Exactly.
And the character itself has this ability to always want to make everything better and everybody happy and around him and everything work.
Right.
Whether it was the kids at the camp or everything with Christmas or any of the movies, it was a running theme.
Right.
The Ernest character was just a good person,
right?
Doing good person things,
exactly,
as opposed to a tragic hero or something like that. That it was just a feel good thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So earlier on in his life, was Jim classically trained as an actor, I heard, or is that another rumor?
That was been more of a rumor. He wasn't, exactly classically trained. He did study a lot of Shakespeare, through high school. Loved to perform it. He really was a fan of like Peter O'Toole, and would love to do impressions of him. His gift of imitation and mimicry was just so awesome that he could really make you think he was classically trained. And so no, he wasn't, but he did study a lot of that in high school and children's theater growing up. There's a place called Studio Players in Lexington, a community theater, and he did quite a bit of work there as well. So he did a lot of community theater work, as well as well-regarded high school actor, won like best actor in the state 2 years in a row in Kentucky. So yeah,
I know he did well. Again, supposedly stand-up dramatic acting. He did musicals. He sang. He was a bit of a Renaissance man in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing musicals as well as all kinds of different plays. Would do some stand-up, because he could, and of course the kind of stand-up he did was more like the storyteller, doing imitations and telling little stories, having his characters that he invented, that he would get up there and do little bits, and that was. And he would do that some in high school. He would do that some at coffee shops in Lexington growing up in the 60s. So he was just doing a bit of everything, just anything to entertain people. He was very well rounded in so many aspects. So
did he have like a theater group that he was a part of or something like Second City or anything like that?
No, I mean, he was really took advantage of all of the community kind of theater in Kentucky. I mean, from anywhere. There's a place called Pioneer Playhouse in Danville, Kentucky, was designated the State Theater of Kentucky for a while. There was a place called the Jenny Wiley Theater out in Prestonsburg, Kentucky. And of course, I mentioned Studio Players in Lexington. And then he was even down into Tennessee, a place called Third Mask Theater in Chattanooga. There was a place in Kingsport, Tennessee. Like they would do like a traveling type of theater. They would play like different schools in the area. Fantastic Productions, it's called. So he was just all over the place, as well as is taking a few stabs at Broadway and off Broadway, taking a few trips to New York. So he was really, and along that time too, he had studied at the Barter Theater in Abingdon, Virginia, right out of high school. He actually left a few weeks short of graduation to attend there in the summer of '68. So he got some good training there. So he was really taking advantage of everything that he could in this area, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee. So,
what made him get into acting? Because that, doing musicals and stuff like that. Yeah, I get there's an aspect of acting in that and everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's mostly singing and performing. It just seemed like anything to perform is what he wanted to do.
Yeah, I think he just loved to perform. I think, he was growing up at an age right when, TV was kind of, people were going from radio to TV, and he was watching a lot of TV and just loved all the characters he was seeing, from Hopalong Cassidy to trying to think, even local. There's some local shows out of Louisville he was watching, and he would love to perform in front of his parents and his family, his older sisters. They were just like a natural audience for him. And so once his older sister, Jake, saw an ad in the paper for children's theater, she thought, "Hey, you want to go try out?" And he's like, "Sure." And then that was it right there. He was actually about 11 at that time. And he was soon like the lead in all the plays and everything. He just quickly advanced once he got in there.
I know he made the Ernest character originally noticeable to everybody through commercials.
Oh yeah.
But do you have any insight onto how he came up with and developed that character?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was really interesting because, he was doing kind of flavors of these kinds of country characters, these or Appalachian type of characters, all throughout high school and early on. And so, he had been out in, to go back a little bit further, he had a character called Sergeant Glory in the early 70s in Nashville for Purity Milk. And it was a pretty big deal in the Nashville area for about 4 years. And so that's when he started working with Carden and Cherry back then, their agency. And so he went out to California for a while, was out there from about 76 to 80, moved back home. There's an actor strike out there, moved back home. And so the Carden and Cherry had recently been hired to develop some commercials for this Beach Bend amusement park in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And so they sent someone up to look at the park, and they're like, yeah, this park needs more than just advertising. This park needs some work. But we can't do anything about that. We're hired to do the ads, but we don't feel like we can show the park. It's because they were trying to compete with like Opryland, a much newer, nicer park in Nashville and stuff. And so they're like, we need a character to talk about the park somewhere else. And so they started to come up with this idea of this character named Ernest that could just talk up the park, about going to the park and all the fun you could have. And so they knew that Jim had moved back to Kentucky, and they said, "Hey, why don't you come down and we're trying to develop an ad for this park." And that's when they kind of came up. They had the basic idea, but I don't know exactly what parts of it that Jim brought into it. But even early on, that vest and the blue jean vest and the cap, they weren't cemented yet. They had a baseball cap, but it wasn't khaki colored yet. And so they did some ads for this Beach Bend park, and they were quite successful. Although it didn't really help the park. The park couldn't really live up to Ernest's hype. I think he shot about 4 commercials in the summer of 80. And so he was essentially shelved at that point. They thought, well, he was just specific for this park. They really weren't sure what else, how else they could use him exactly. And then about a year and a half later, Purity comes along, and they're wanting some more ads for their products there in Nashville for milk and ice cream products. And so Carden and Cherry showed them these Ernest commercials. They're like, well, I know you all know Jim from the Sergeant Glory ads, right? Well, here's an ad, some ads we did for Beach Bend. And they really liked them, and I think them having a previous, connection with Jim through the Sergeant Glory, they really wanted them to start doing Ernest commercials for Purity Dairies. And that's where it really took off, because right then, them and then this Pine State Dairy in Raleigh, North Carolina, were like the first really two that hired him for the dairies. And that's when it just really took off. And then you had a bunch of other dairies, and you getting into, gas stations, convenient food marts, and all these types of things. and it just completely explodes from there for the next, really next 4 or 5 years, going into the movies. I mean, and it's interesting, people don't realize just what a commercial phenomenon, that character was, as they would go market to market all over the United States without ever having to do a national spot. Anyway.
Well, and he was doing Toyota, autos or other auto centers, Brahms ice cream, like you said, the dairy stuff, gas companies, convenience stores, just everything. And but his range was so big, and he reached such a wide audience, which brings me to another thing that I love that I heard. It was in the 80s sometime, the Daytona 500.
You're right.
Where Jim was brought in as a guest, and Mickey Mouse was supposed to be the grand marshal in the parade, and Jim got so much more attention than Mickey that the executives took notice of him.
Exactly, because what had happened is that Jim had recently, he was already popular with a dairy up there, and then he had recently gotten signed on to this Dellin car dealership. And I guess just because cars, Indy 500, that kind of connection, they wanted him to represent them in this parade. And so Carton and Cherry was like, sure, and so he went up there. And, this is right when Michael Eisner had taken over at Disney, coming from Paramount, and Jeffrey Katzenberg was there with him. And so they were in the crowd. And of course, them coming from California, even though Jim had done some commercials out in California, I think by this time they were unfamiliar with who Ernest was. And so, Michael Eisner has the story. He said, he goes, I'm at a parade. He goes, there's 500,000 people there. And he says, their governor comes by and applause. Mickey Mouse comes by, more applause. And Jim Varney comes by, and 500,000 people went berserk. And he says, I was thinking we ought to do something about that. So I think right away he's seeing who is this guy? He's seeing dollar signs, and he quite, intelligently, he gets in touch with John Cherry, kind of gives him a crash course on who Ernest is and everything. And that's what brought about, the first, 4 movies with Disney, Camp and Jail, Christmas, and Scared Stupid. So that was just one of those which are crazy things.
4 instant classics, and by any term, for the money that they put into them, which wasn't a lot for each.
Right.
They made quite a bit of money back, so I'm not surprised that they kept making them.
Yeah, I mean, back then, I think the first the Ernest Goes to Camp, I think the budget was like $3 million, and they made something almost like 20, which back in 87, that's quite a haul. And then for Christmas,
when I looked it up, it was 24 million.
Yeah,
and Christmas made even more than that.
Yeah, and Christmas, I think they doubled the budget to 6. Still wasn't a lot, and still did and did a little bit more into the 20. Still quite a return. And of course, the big thing then too, you have to remember back in the 80s is when the VHS rentals were a big deal. And I think that's where they really made a lot of money in VHS rentals. So yeah, I've never seen any numbers on the VHS. That's those rentals, but those had to be crazy high.
Yeah.
So yeah,
he was a man of many means.
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit though and ask a question about.
Sure.
Can you tell us about Johnny Cash and Friends? Because Jim ended up as a cast member on that as well.
Yeah, that was really interesting to me because we had heard stories about his friendship with Johnny Cash, and it was this friend and manager that he had early on that Jim had. His name was Joel Lyles, who was out in California, and I just by chance was able to find his contact information and to talk to him. And he was really huge as far as my book was concerned. Really, I think a whole decade of my book is mainly comes from all of Joe's recollections. And so Joe was able to tell me all of the, how did he, A to B to C, like how all these things were connected, how all these things happened, right? Because he was managing Jim during this time. So he knew all about it. So yeah, Johnny became aware of Jim when Jim was in Nashville in those mid 70s when Jim had moved there with Joe and was trying to, get his career to take off, doing some stand up at this place called the Exit Inn in Nashville. And he even got an early part in this special that Johnny Cash had, this called Riding the Rails. And Jim was acting in this scene with him. And so he didn't get to meet Cash then, but shortly after, Cash saw him perform at the Exit Inn. And then also Jim and Joe became friends with this person named Lonnie Hutchins, who was a friend and this person worked with Cash, ran the House of Cash Publications there in Tennessee for Johnny Cash. So to make a long story short, though, Lonnie really was kind of in Johnny's ear about Jim and kind of keeping him updated on what Jim was doing, and really helped Jim to get on that show. This summer, it was a summer replacement series in '76. The variety shows at this point were still going. They're still kind of. I don't know if they were actually peaking at this time. They were still going pretty strong. And Johnny Cash had a variety show in the late '60s, and so CBS was wanting to bring him back for a while. I think they did like 4 episodes, and they were pretty successful. Steve Martin, who was just beginning to blow up on Saturday Night Live, was on there with him, which was pretty cool to know that Jim and Steve Martin worked together. So yeah, and that kind of started a lifelong friendship between Jim and Johnny, which was amazing to think about too. That he had a friendship with somebody that was that big in the entertainment industry.
Yeah, a guy like Johnny Cash is probably somebody that just about anyone would be, bragging about a friendship with.
Yeah, and he would love that. He would do imitations of Johnny Cash. He would do them in front of Johnny, and yeah, Johnny really was a fan of comedy and stand up, and he really enjoyed Jim's, and so they I think they got together really well.
So going back into the Ernest character, question I have kind of, Vern is a big part of the Ernest character.
Yep.
And a lot of the speculation that we've seen is that Vern is just the fourth wall break,
right,
to bring the audience in.
Right.
Was there actually a character that he had conceived of Vern, or was that just a fourth wall break?
It was just not having a big budget. They didn't really have enough money for another actor, and it essentially became the cameraman. And it just ended up working so well. There was so many things that were kind of unintentional that ended up working just extremely well. And I think a lot of these are just related to the budget and not having a lot of money, and to kind of having to be more imaginative in that working so well. And the way that, they use this wide angle lens, of course, to really accentuate his features and his nose and everything. And which is not great when you've already kind of got a larger nose and all this. So
your face made of rubber.
Yeah. And so, but he can make all those faces, of course, and it really worked so well in the way they could play off each other. I know this one writer, producer, director, Coke Sam's, he would refer to it like as a dance, between the two. This Jim May, who was the main cameraman, was really Vern for most of all the commercials, and it really was kind of a dance between them. And yeah, it was really just a budget thing, but it worked so well that, of course, even when they had the money, they just like, well, this is working so well. And then, of course, one thing that they realized, John Cherry realized, the director for the commercials and the movies, was like, so many people have a preconceived notion of who Vern is, right? What he looks like, what he is. And of course, to show him now would shatter a lot of people's. It would probably reinforce some that maybe had it close to the, whatever, but a lot of people would shatter that. and they just figured, no, we're not going to shatter that. But it's funny. I read in some article though that Jim said that if they ever did decide to do Vern, he wanted to be Vern. So he would, I don't know if somehow they would be able to make him be Vern as well. Of course, that would be a lot easier to do today, or at least, getting into the 90s and so on, compared to the early mid 80s to do something like that. But yeah, that would have been funny.
I always thought that Vern might have been, and obviously, they tell you it's the cameraman. I always thought it might have been us. Like, I always thought he might have been talking to us directly, like the fans and stuff. Like,
I mean, I think essentially, yeah, and I think essentially that kind of was in some ways. I know John Cherry, for him, he was like, he considered Vern, he called him a tea sipper type, like the Major Winchester character from MASH, if you remember. That was kind of.
Well, we remember MASH very
big fans of MASH.
Yeah. And so I don't know if a lot of other people, are, but yeah, great, obviously great show, and that kind of that highbrow, or at least like to think of himself as highbrow. I mean, of course, he lived in the same neighborhood Ernest did, so I don't know that how much of a difference there was, but and I think even when Jim would started doing commercials for the New York audience, and a Sprite commercial where he's in Vern's wine cellar kind of played to that kind of highbrow, that Vern's got a wine cellar and all this stuff, and he's drinking Sprite as if it were some fine Merlot and all this, and it was really good. And so I think that really was allowed them for John Cherry at least to kind of show who he really felt Vern was. But
I'm surprised there was never a movie like that where like Ernest moves into a high class neighborhood and nobody wants him there.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there was the Beverly Hillbillies, but it wasn't Ernest.
True.
I guess. I guess. Okay. Yeah. I guess he was that movie.
I mean,
just not as Ernest. Yeah.
The Jed Clampett character was kind of in the same vein.
Oh yeah. True.
A little bit.
That was also the first time they did one of those movies that succeeded. Because they had tried to do stuff like that based on old TV shows before.
Yeah.
When they did that one, it kind of set the tone for others where it became satire.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, we're going to take this, but we're going to make fun of this because we know what it is.
Yeah. I thought they did a good job with the Brady Bunch. I forget if that was right after that.
The Brady Bunch was fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that one and all the ones I've done since, I think the Beverly Hillbillies kind of set that tone.
Yeah, I thought they did a good job.
How did Jim end up in that role?
That I don't know exactly how he got on the radar of Penelope Spheris, but I know that she really fought for him. She really wanted him, and that the studio had echoed what so many what he had feared for years, that he was going to be too associated with Ernest. And of course, I think one thing that helped him is the look of Jed looked much different, especially wearing the hat and everything. And so in appearing, Jed was a bit older as well. I think that helped. And he actually had to do a screen test that he passed. But I think that definitely helped, that it was a different look that he could kind of morph into. And I know I read too that Sam Elliott was someone that Penelope had considered, but I think because of Jim's comedy background, that for her that made him a stronger candidate. But I mean, I think Sam would have been great too. I mean, he does great comedy. He has a great comedy chops as well. But
Sam Elliott as Jed Clampett would have been a much different Jed Clampett.
Yeah. But I mean,
it would have been good.
You're right. Yeah, exactly. Great, I think both would have been good. Different. But yeah, love Sam Elliott.
I can't imagine anyone else in that role anymore. Yeah, I can't even see Buddy Ebsen in that role without seeing Jim over top of him.
Yeah.
What's funny though is like in that one he had to tone himself down. It was a very subtle humor.
Exactly. And
it was all in the delivery of the lines, which had to be very dry at the time.
Right. And I think in Penelope was having to tell him to kind of tone it down sometimes because he was so used to that being. But he was really the more of the kind of quieter members of that family, and he was, more the straight man to everybody else. But I thought the scene, especially with Leah Thompson, the happiness scene there, the line, I think he did such a great his mannerisms, his playing off her in that scene was really great. I mean, he could do, like a lot of great actors, it's so much with just an expression. It's not so much their delivery, but just in their expressions and so forth. And that was a really great scene. And I think that illustrated, how good an actor he was. That, anyway.
So Jim's movies with the Ernest character, he did Goes to Camp, he did Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Jail, Ernest Scared Stupid, Ernest Goes to School, Ernest Rides Again, Slam Dunk Ernest, Ernest Goes to Africa, Ernest in the there wasn't anywhere Ernest didn't go.
Right. Yeah.
But like how much input and stuff did Jim have on like deciding, all right, this is what we're gonna do next, or in writing the scripts and stuff like that? Did he do any of that stuff?
I think his was more about just some of the scenes themselves. I think like with the commercials, like he would just add bits, to the scenes themselves, and really the storylines and so forth. I don't know how much input that he had, or I'm not even sure that he really wanted to have necessarily. I think he kind of trusted them and trusted the script, but yeah, they would appreciate whatever he could add to the scene, especially when it comes to the the physicality of certain things, I'm sure, and mannerisms and those kinds of things. His input was always welcome.
What's wild to me is that in the day and age that we live in, like I know eventually everybody, they have their peaks and their valleys and everything. And, through some of the later movies, Jim was back in his valley, but everything comes around again. And I honestly feel like an Ernest movie nowadays could be, almost to the heights where he was when he was doing Saves Christmas and Goes to Camp and stuff like that.
Yeah. You talking about like somebody coming out with a new Ernest movie you're talking about?
No, I'm saying if Jim was still with us today,
would he? Yeah,
I think he could do something new again, and people would be like, I forgot I loved that.
Sure.
Nostalgia is the big thing that's in nowadays.
I think so for sure. I mean, I think he would be, just blown away by how beloved those movies are and the character. I mean, I know I am, and I mean, I can't imagine him feeling any different. The fact that so many people were talking about like he was their childhood, and they introduced the character to their children, and I think too now but in the 80s and into the 90s, you had like family viewing, right? Not everybody sitting on their phones, and it was such a shared experience, and I think it's great to see that now, families watching him together like they used to, right? Where it's a shared viewing experience, and they have the jokes that they love to trade back and forth. The friends and family have all these little jokes that he did that becomes part of how you communicate with your friends. And my mom and I would have the same when she took us to so many movies growing up, watching like Fletch and so forth. And there's like scenes like the melanoma, carcinoma, some kind of anoma, those things we had, repeated back to each other a million times. And I understand that people do the same thing with Ernest and his lines, and that's great. That's just awesome.
Yeah. One of my favorite ones of all time is always going to be the,
yeah.
I could never contort my face the way
your face is not rubber enough to do that properly. There's two people in the world that could have done that. One is Jim Varney, the other one's Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Like those are the only two people I know with that rubber of face.
Yeah.
That ability.
Going on a little bit more, Jim had a kids show, the Jim Varney. It was Hey Ernest.
Hey Ernest.
Hey Ernest.
Yeah.
which he actually ended up winning a Daytime Emmy Award for.
Yeah. And I mean, it was good.
No, I was just to say that's one of the few things that he's done that I've never seen before. That was new to me.
Yeah, it was on CBS. Actually, it was on. I think it came on before the Pee Wee Herman show. Like it was right on the same block. If you can imagine watching that in the Pee Wee Herman show inside the same hour or so on CBS. I mean, that's crazy. But even though
like part of their Saturday morning lineup,
yeah.
Okay.
And but it only was they didn't renew it, even though it got critical acclaim. But I guess the numbers weren't there. And this was in the fall into winter of '88. There was like 13 episodes, and they were a half hour, and they each had their own theme, and they were really good, really funny. Kind of a different, kind of like Pee Wee. It was a little different than you'd usually see for Saturday mornings. And had a lot of good variety of his characters and other characters. He had Gaylord Sartain on there doing characters. He had been in some Ernest movies. Just a terrific actor. And he won a Daytime Emmy. What was really funny about that, and this kind of shows you maybe the kind of love-hate relationship people had with the character, is he wins a Daytime Emmy for Ernest, for playing Ernest, and the other characters, of course, some of the other characters. But a year before, he had been nominated for a Razzie for Ernest Goes to Camp, playing the same character, right? The same character is nominated for a Razzie in 1 year for worst, and then a year later, he wins a Daytime Emmy for playing that character. I mean, that just shows you, I think, just, how some people felt about him. But the kids loved him. I mean, and that's what the movies are all about. We're really geared toward the kids. So
how did...
Because this is... Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so we've been discussing the movies that Jim was in.
Yeah.
How did he get involved in the possibly largest animated movie series ever created, Toy Story?
That I looked for that. I don't know exactly. That obviously there was some connection because of Disney, and I don't know who in Disney it was, but obviously that his connection with Disney through the Ernest movies, that they wanted him. And I don't know. The other thing, I wish I knew too, is was he the only person considered for that role? I don't know, but I'm sure he had no idea at the time, what that movie was going to be. Right? That was just amazing that he is part of this movie that really made history as far as the advances at that point in animation.
Part.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like Slinky Dog is basically second only to Buzz and Woody in those movies.
That's arguably, yeah. I would maybe so. Yeah. That's and that's great.
When Jim passed, Blake Clark took over. Did the two know each other? They
actually did. It's really crazy. They and I didn't know this. They were actually knew each other from the Comedy Store out in Los Angeles in the late 70s. And they were, and you can find it online on YouTube. They were in a movie called Fast Food in like '88, and so they were actually in. Jim plays this Wrangler Bob type character. He looks like a skinny version of Boss Hog. He's got the white cowboy hat and suit, and he's trying to take over this restaurant. He wants to buy this restaurant from these like college kids, and he's in Blake Clark's character is like one of his underlings, and there's even a scene of them together in his office, and so you get to see both Slinky Dogs together in the same scene, and it's pretty cool. You can probably find that specific scene on YouTube if you look for it. Jim Varney and Fast Food. So yeah, they had known each other, and I think that's really great. I think them carrying on that Slinky Dog character, to me, it shows that Jim did such a good job in playing that role and in making that character so memorable that they're like, we can't do a third Toy Story movie without Slinky Dog, and I think that is a tribute to Jim. And so I think it's great that they were able to do that. And I think Blake's done a great job of carrying that on. So
I wonder if nowadays, if they would have done what they did with Dom Rickles after he passed away and just pieced together bits of things Jim said to keep the character going.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
So I read a very weird fact, which if it involves Jim's family and it's true, then it would involve yours as well.
Okay.
Do you guys have a distant relative that was a member of the Hatfield family?
Yeah, and it's really not even
the
that
Hatfield McCoy connection.
Yeah, and it's really not even that distant, which is really crazy. So
this is true.
Oh yeah, it's true. It's
what I read is that it was his grandfather.
Yeah, I mean, I put it in the book. I put this section of the genealogy of the family tree in the book. I was just so taken with it. I mean, and so I'm sure you're reading through Jim's early life, and then you get all this stuff, and you're like, what, you know? I thought, to me, I mean, I'm writing about what I think is interesting to me, of course, and I thought this was crazy. And what I don't know is that, as far as I knew, I'm talking to my mom and my aunt as I'm writing the book, and as far as I knew, that they knew that their grandfather and the Varneys that were in West Virginia, like, knew of the Hatfields, like they were neighbors, or they knew each other, maybe hunted squirrels together, but I had never heard that there was any relation to any of them, right? And so when I was writing the book, I'm also getting on ancestry.com and just doing genealogy stuff and just finding out stuff. And then what I was finding was just completely blowing my mind. And so what I had found is that Jim Varney's grandfather, Andrew Varney, was first cousins with Louisa Chafin. Of course, that's the wife of Devil Anse Hatfield. So, I mean, that's, she's the matriarch of the Hatfield family, and that's Jim's grandfather's first cousin. I mean, that's close. So, so they shared basically the same Varney blood coming up from there, right? We all share like the same Varney blood. It's not like he was a descendant of the Hatfields, but they, if you start up higher up with the Varneys, with Louisa, she's a Varney, and then all her children would have that same Varney blood. And so, and then the next question was, well, did Jim know this? I'm like, I don't know that he did exactly, or if maybe he did he know the exact connection, that it was this close? And I don't think I'll ever know the answer, because I've even heard Billy Bob Thornton talk about, because they were good friends, that he's like, oh yeah, Jim knew he was a relative of the Hatfields. And I'm like thinking, okay, well, that's all right. But then did he know? Yeah, did he know exactly?
He knew that, and we never got Ernest Goes West. What?
Well, here's the thing that'll blow your mind. I mean, he was working on a screenplay, a Hatfield and McCoy screenplay, when he passed, that I think Billy Bob Thornton was going to star in. That they had already they had been friends since the 80s, because they shared the same manager. So they had been friends since like 87, 88. Unfortunately, Jim wasn't able to get a role in Sling Blade, but he got a role later in another Billy Bob Thornton movie called Daddy and Them. So, but yeah, Jim was wanting to, he's working on the screenplay with this person, and they were going to have Billy Bob Thornton signed on to play a character in it. And but it's interesting, the character that Jim was going to play, because I think he was going to play his relative, and it was this person named Tug Varney. Well, there's like no Tug Varney that existed, right? I mean, I've looked again and again. I'm thinking, so I don't know that. That's what's confusing. I think that maybe he did know he was related, but I don't know that he knew this exact relationship. But here's the other thing that really blew my mind, maybe even more, and it was even more bittersweet, perhaps, is that I also found out we're related to Daniel Boone. And I'm thinking, how did nobody know that? Like that, I mean, I get it on the one hand, you're going back more generations, but still Daniel Boone. and that, nobody knew, and that would have completely blown Jim's mind. So to find that out and not being able to tell Jim about it, that was extremely bittersweet, because he, loved to hunt and loved all that stuff, history, and that would have been just unreal. And so, yeah, crazy.
There's a podcast that I listen to regularly, and whenever they do it with love, but it's called "How Did This Get Made?" And they take movies that they think are ridiculous or silly, or they're just like, how did this ever,
Paul Scheer,
they'll talk about it. His wife, Paul Scheer's wife, was actually talking about how in Ernest Goes to Jail, when he plays the evil version of himself, she's like, I didn't realize Jim was sexy.
Yeah.
Right. Doing the research for this, like, I saw a lot of stuff where women had made comments on some of his old 8x10s and some of his headshots and stuff like that about how attractive he was. And I was like, wait a minute, was Ernest secretly a sex symbol?
Yeah. I mean, that's like the cover of my book, right? That's his headshot from William Morris from like 76, taken directly from it. So I mean, that's become a thing, right? It's funny to watch, and Jim would have definitely got a kick out of that, for sure. So, and there's this DeLorean pic too that he's sitting there, and it looks like ripped right off the cover of GQ, where he's sitting there in this leather jacket, with one foot out of the car in his driveway in this DeLorean, and it explodes. I mean, it's when it's posted a lot of times. So that it's great, because I think too it's also just because of the contrast, right? It's just so much different than Ernest as well, and that just really just kind of jolts people. So. Yeah,
he really was without much, like, he didn't really need prosthetics. He really didn't need money. Just take off the hat, slick the hair back, and a little smolder. And he could switch from character to character believably all the time. Yeah,
it was really something. He in doing so many accents, and he could do an English accent, but do like 3 or 4 different dialects, and just it was just crazy. I mean. So much ability.
Is there any truth to the story that he wouldn't allow himself to be photographed or videoed smoking because of his love for kids? And
as far as I know, and I can tell you, I am in the possession of hundreds of pictures, and there are extremely few that he's holding a cigarette, or I think of maybe one where he even has a cigarette in his mouth, but there's other ones where he's maybe holding one, but there's very few. So that does seem like a pretty true statement, just from the evidence that you don't see. And I've been careful through the years of kind of respecting that, of course. And if there's a picture, sometimes if I'll like maybe crop it out, thinking about how, but it's also, and telling his story and who he is, of course, you need to show that at some point. And so we have had somewhat with when he is, but I would definitely not show. I think that there's a few pictures, I think, where it's behind the scenes and he's dressed as Ernest and he's maybe holding a cigarette, and I definitely wouldn't want to show those. I mean, I would be,
that feels disingenuous to the character.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that.
Right.
It's part of the lore too that I've always, ever since the day I heard that for the first time, I've always loved that, and it stuck with me, because I'm like, that's someone who doesn't want to ruin something that he knows is special for others.
Right.
Especially any little kids who might be seeing that.
Right. And that was like my book as well. Like I wasn't putting it together to make a quick buck. I'm like, I want this to be something that's good, that's comprehensive, that I'm not looking for anything shock value to and that it's just going to be a nice thorough read that really kind of gives everybody the behind the scenes on his life and the character and everything. So I respect it, and I completely respect the character in things like that were his wishes while he was playing the character, of course.
Now, I know there was a Kickstarter for the documentary. How is that going?
That's been going well. It's been a long while. I know it in the beginning, even before the Kickstarter, we had been working on it. And of course that was through COVID, and it kind of delayed even the start of the Kickstarter and everything. But we had a successful Kickstarter. We've got over 30 hours of interviews, and most people were able to get to through going to Nashville a few times, and then in the Lexington area, because you have all of the Ernest people down in Nashville, and then all the Jim Varney people around here. And even his very first drama teacher, if you can believe that she's still alive, because she wasn't much older than him at the time. We interviewed her not long ago, and that was awesome to be able to interview think about it, Jim Varney's very first drama teacher, and getting her insight. And she's still sharp as a tack in her mid 80s. So we have a lot of great interviews. We've got a pretty a major Hollywood star that I interviewed myself, that I can't say who it is yet. We still don't have his release signed, but that is quite exciting, that we got as an interviewee. But we've got a lot of great people, and it's very exciting. And they kind of brought me on. They wanted to kind of base it on my book, inspired by my book, and that use the same title and everything. And then I've brought in like as a kind of a producer or advisor, and just doing everything I can to help them find people to interview. A lot of people we interviewed, I had interviewed with my book, for my book, and so we were able to go back and re-interview them and really do a much better job, I think, a more thorough interview with many of them. We've also got a great relationship with John Cherry's son, Josh, who, along with his siblings, they own the Ernest intellectual property, and he's been very forthcoming in letting us use whatever kinds of Ernest pictures and videos and things as well. And so that's been great. So that's great to have a really good relationship with him through all this. So so right now we've begun post-production, and I wish I had an update like on a possible release, but I don't. But very excited about it. Yeah,
I'm not going to say this is my guess for who the big person could be involved, but there is an internet, or there is a picture floating around the internet where a gentleman who's quite famous nowadays has begun to age into and look like Jim Varney.
Oh,
so if you ever get a chance, look up the Jim Varney John Cena photo.
Oh yeah, I've seen a lot of those. Yeah, I mean, those are great, because I mean, I'm sure he probably gets a dozen Twitter messages a day, or tags that when are you going to play Ernest? And I think I saw
goes to the gym.
Yeah, I think I saw, maybe it wasn't Twitter, maybe it was Instagram. He had posted some kind of Ernest picture a while back, where he was kind of acknowledging that to some degree. But yeah, that
would look fantastic.
Yeah,
Ernest.
That would almost be a terrifying Ernest.
Yeah, I mean, I posted something funny on Twitter the other day, because Jim's like making a muscle, and I think he was more muscular than people realize. And I was kind of teasing that. I'm like, is John Cena, is he is he jacked enough to play Ernest? So just having fun with it, because
I mean, when it comes to Ernest, the character, obviously in a documentary it would be okay, but otherwise, I think he's like Back to the Future. He's like the Princess Bride. He's like Mr. Rat. You never want to see these things remade or recast.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I'd rather live in a world where nobody else ever plays Ernest again than to ever get more.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think if that ever was to happen, I think they would understand, and they would try to make it maybe some relative of his, perhaps. Yeah. And I think that would definitely make it easier for people to digest, and would it be easier on the actor too, that knowing that they're not having to.
You guys are probably related to John Cena if you look it up.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
I mean, it's very possible. But
yeah.
But Justin, where can people find you online if they want to get a hold of you and talk to you?
Well, I'm on
follow you.
Twitter. I'm on really everywhere. My Facebook page has grown quite a bit in the last few years. The importance of being earnest. It's basically the same title as my book. On Facebook, it's pretty easy to find. Twitter.
Title,
I'm sorry.
Fantastic title, by the way.
Thank you. And even Instagram is the same way. It's pretty easy to find. And don't have much of a following. I've started to put more stuff onto TikTok. I just think the demographic I think is stronger on Facebook for a lot of the typical Ernest fans today. But it's crazy though. Like, I'm sorry.
Is the Kickstarter still going where people could donate?
I don't think they can. I don't know. I don't know if you can. I know it's over. I don't know if you can still donate. I'm trying to. I don't know about that.
Everybody just send Justin money.
Yeah, that works too. If you want to buy a book,
trust him. He's going to put it towards the documentary.
Yeah, or audiobook. I mean, the audiobook's pretty much everywhere now. What's great about the audiobook compared to my book that I released it about 12 years ago. Back then, I didn't have much of a social media presence really, and so I was able to really only publish through Amazon, which of course is a big one, of course. But now with the audiobook, I'm able to kind of distribute it so many more places other than just Amazon and Audible, and so into libraries and so forth. So that's exciting to have it such a wide distribution, which will also help, of course, people even discover that there's even a book about him, period, and they can buy, the hardback or paperback or ebook. So that's exciting as well. So I really put a lot into the audiobook. It was it really kind of was more personal to me, I guess, just because I'm saying the words out loud, and it was interesting how it made it more personal, talking about my family and all that. And so excited to give people a more personal kind of way to enjoy the story.
So just as a note, the Kickstarter is closed, but there is a link on the Kickstarter page to pre-order the film.
True. Right. Yeah. Right.
So before
just in case anybody's interested.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Before we wrap this up and Kip does the end of podcast questionnaire, is there anything we haven't asked about that maybe that, might be interesting to let everybody know about Jim from over the years?
Just that, one thing I talked about, he kind of, that kind of rubbed off on me as a child. Like he kind of invented his own cool, like the way he looked and the way he dressed and the way he was just himself. He just liked what he liked and really wasn't, didn't really follow somebody else's lead. And that kind of rubbed off on me as a child growing up, and seeing that was pretty powerful. And and so he was just a very cool customer. And he could have been I think about, like, he would have been good at advertising things just as himself almost, because I know he would come into our house showing us a knife or watch he bought, and he could make it seem so cool the way he could just manipulate it and show it off and stuff. And he would have been a good advertiser just like that almost. I think he had a natural way about him like that. Was definitely different than Ernest in those regards. Was self-assured. And I compare it to like Clark Kent and Superman, where you see that, especially in that one scene where he almost reveals himself, the way he changes and stands up straight and knows all that. And that was kind of like Jim and Ernest, right? It was like Jim is more like Superman and straight it's so suave and it can move so effortlessly and have the perfect posture and all that. And Ernest, very different. So it was those little things like that he used to change the character. And So yeah, that was one of the things that comes to mind that I talk about often with him.
I appreciate you for all this, man.
Sure,
it's a character I grew up loving, and I know I'm not alone on that one.
And I'm just happy to help to kind of bridge that for people, since Jim's not here to kind of talk about him and in his life, and just to give people that connection, and to know what he was like. And so, and I'm happy to do that in whatever part I've been able to. So, it's, I know there's a lot of fans out there, and they, in the Ernest fans, that they were the main group that when I was writing the book that I had in mind, it was really meant mostly for all the Ernest fans. That when he died young like that, it was just like a jolt, and just wanted to give them something to kind of have to remember him by, kind of more than anything.
I like that it's 25 years later and we're still happily talking about him.
Yeah. It's
and
awesome.
Another 25 we'll still be talking about him, I think.
Probably so.
Gosh. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Oh, if we're still on this side of the
hopefully. Yeah.
So we are horrible podcasters by definition. And we never knew how to end this thing.
You're fine.
We decided to steal from somebody else. And we do this questionnaire that was created by Bernard Pivot. It was perfected by James Lipton on Inside the Actors Studio.
Gotcha, right.
So just answer however you feel.
Okay.
About 10 questions.
Okay.
What is your favorite word?
Oh, goodness. I don't know. I'll just go with maybe effort is a good one. I'll just kind of go with.
Okay. What is your least favorite word?
I can't think of one right now.
Okay. What sound or noise do you love?
Just any kind of music, maybe. Love music.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Lawnmower.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Comedy writing.
What profession other than your own would you not like to attempt?
Airline pilot.
Creatively, what turns you on?
Just coming up with an idea. Just any idea that yep, just putting some idea together to it could be something, right? Whatever it is, perhaps.
Creatively, what turns you off?
Maybe doing something somebody else has done.
Okay. And our two favorite questions.
Okay.
What is your favorite curse word?
Oh, probably fuck. I mean, that's all.
Here's one for you, because I never heard him do it. What would Ernest's favorite curse word be?
He would probably have a word that he thought was a curse word that wasn't, like something like maybe Shazam or something like that. I'm thinking, right?
I like that.
he probably, Ernest, he probably doesn't even know curse words, and so he would think Shazam or something like that is a curse word.
He was probably the kind of guy. Yeah, he's probably the kind of guy that laughed at or giggled at a schoolgirl if he heard somebody say titmouse.
Yeah. So what was Richie Cunningham? What would he? What was his? Did he have a curse word, or he had a?
He was like, gee whiz.
Yeah. Well, he would say bucko, calling somebody bucko. Remember those? That was always the thing when he got mad. I think it was. He'd say bucko or something like that.
And the last question on this list, and my personal favorite: if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh gosh. we can start the party now. Maybe that's a good one.
I like that.
I like that. That's a good one. That's an original. I like that.
Justin, thank you.